How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am good as well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I just want to let you know that I am recording the meeting for the podcast.
Okay, that's not a problem.
Welcome to Community Catalyst. This podcast explores the role of traditional authorities and their effect on informal trade and land access. I'm your host, uThubelihle Mlambo, and in today's episode, we have a special guest who will help us understand the relationship between informal trading and traditional leadership. Our guest, Wendy Londiwe Lushozi, is a professional planner, professional town and regional planner registered with SACPLAN. She graduated with a Bachelor of Technology in Town and Regional Planning from Durban University of Technology in KwaZulu-Natal. She has also worked in various planning roles, including uMhlathuze Municipality in the Land Use Management section and Msunduzi Municipality in the Spatial Planning Unit. In addition to her practical experience, Wendy has also received training at the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, making her well versed in the intricate dynamics between traditional authorities and urban planning. I am so delighted, Wendy, to have you as my guest today, so you can share your knowledge on this important topic. Welcome and thank you again for joining me on Community Catalyst.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the warm welcome. I am also glad to be a part of this experience as well.
Just to start, I would like to obviously share my background and my personal interest on this topic. Uh, I grew up in a rural town, KwaZulu Natal, called Imbazwana.
Hmm.
It's under KwaMhlabu local municipality. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Yes, I've heard of it, yes.
Okay, so that's where I'm from, and obviously, we are under the authority of course, Bagwazikali, which we do recognize as Mbila traditional authorities. And when I was growing up, obviously, I had no knowledge of urban planning. So the way I analyze space is sort of different to how I am analyzing space currently. And once I started being exposed into the course and this profession, that's when I started analyzing the space that I grew up in differently. And I've been looking at mainly like the central town that we occupy and we use as the community. And then that's where I started realizing Uguti, the way in which land distribution happens, it has certain effects on informal traders specifically, how it shapes their spaces and how it limits the spaces in which they occupy. So that's where the interest of this research and the topic came from.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's very interesting. What you are saying is true. Like there's not much vast knowledge of urban planning, especially within rural communities. You
Yes.
only get to learn the impact and the effect that town planning has as you do your own research or as you study further in like development studies. That's where you get to realize the role that urban planning or town planning has in informal settlements or in rural areas,
Yeah.
especially because town planning is mostly known in urban areas, but
True.
also it is regulatory in also rural communities as well, especially right now.
Always the urban environment, the urban space. And I think we don't really look at or maybe focus on rural environments and the spaces in rural communities and understanding the challenges that the communities face, maybe, or like planners who work in those spaces face as well. So, yeah, that's why I wanted to research about this and understand the challenges that informal traders face and maybe the role in which traditional authorities have in those challenges. Based on your knowledge, in the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, what can you say is the role of traditional leaders in the context of urban and regional planning?
Well, urban leaders play a major role
Mm-hmm.
um, in like assisting the urban and regional space to
Mm,
be in contact with um, community members, local community members,
mm-hmm.
because they influence um, the informal activities
Mm,
that take place in local communities. So urban planners are able to work with traditional leaders
mm,
who are well aware of the needs of the community members so that they can be able to provide for the necessary frameworks
mm.
that will enhance the role of the traditional leaders, sorry, and also regulate the economy and local municipalities. They play a major role in being the mediators between town planning as well as the local communities, which include the informal traders that we are focusing on in this topic. So,
Oh,
as town planners, or from my experience as a town planner, traditional leaders play a major role when it comes to mediating town planners and local communities. They become the voices of local communities. So public participation is run through them as well, so that town
yes.
planners are able to know the necessary things that are needed by local communities, such as the necessary infrastructure that is needed by local communities, which supports the informal traders.
Yes, I love how you answer that. It's so informative as well. And I like the mention of public participation, how traditional leaders are the voice for the community when urban planning decisions are being made. And I love the term that you use, voice, of the course that we are currently doing, which is called Advanced Planning Thought, where we're being trained to not focus on the problem and think of creative ways in which we can um, understand what the problem is requiring from us as planners. And speaking of
Yes.
voice, we use it as a planning tool that looks at the meaningful and inclusive participation of individuals and communities in decision-making processes, which then shape the urban environments. But in this case, obviously, we're looking at the rural environments. So I'd like to
Yes.
know from you, what strategies have you found that are effective in incorporating the voices of, say, the traditional leaders as they represent the community and the planning process?
Yes, so yes, advocacy planning is very important.
Yes,
And as part of the advocacy planning strategy, you need stakeholders such as your traditional leaders, as I have mentioned,
yes,
because they are the ones that have the best interest of the community at heart. And also, the community members trust their traditional authority. Okay,
yes,
so it's very important to make sure that you come up with a bottom up approach. You start from that community level and establish the needs of the community through public participation, as I have mentioned, that is done through the
yes,
local authorities that are able to tell you, as the town planners, what the plans need um, to how the plans need to go, you know.
yes,
So they are good intermediaries between planners and informal traders, and they're able to facilitate, as I've mentioned, the voices of informal traders in planning processes. So that's where you know that your planning processes advocate for the local communities. They are driven by what the people want. So that is a great approach for planning, because we are planning for communities, for planning to be sustainable, for the
yes.
development to be sustainable. You must make sure that you are planning according to what the communities need.
I love that you mentioned advocacy planning and the bottom up approach, where traditional authorities are the voice and they represent the community in the decision making process. Um, However, I would like to know, how can planners ensure that the voices of, say, the informal traders now are not only heard, but they also influence the planning outcomes?
Okay, so town planning, it involves the allocation of zonings,
Yes.
um, and the formulation of schemes. And currently, the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Acts
Mm.
requires municipality to have a single land use scheme, which
Yeah.
also incorporates rural areas. So in the town planning schemes and the allocation of zonings, there is also the allocation of trading spaces. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so by working with traditional leaders, town planning are able to identify the suitable areas for informal trading activities. And also town planning also has um, plans and policies that are based on infrastructure development, which focuses on infrastructure development that supports the needs of informal trading. So you have assistance from your traditional leaders as well that help you with identifying the required structure by the local communities, and also providing the basic amenities for informal traders, such as your waste management, your sanitation, and your water, basically. So the policies and the plans that town planning has regulates informal trading in local communities as well, or in rural areas in this context as well.
You mentioned the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act and how it gives authority to planners to allocate trading spaces, obviously with assistance from traditional authorities. And I just wanted to know, Uguti, personally, I feel like in rural areas, traditional authorities are not that well informed about spatial planning. So, how do you then bridge that when you look at the fact that planners who probably work in the municipality are the ones responsible for allocating trading spaces, but then you find that traditional authorities are the ones who are responsible for land distribution? How do we then bridge that gap of making sure that the allocation of trading spaces is, I don't know, but like it's suitable for like informal
Yeah.
traders? Yeah. How do
No,
we?
I understand. I understand your question, because you find that often the traditional councils or the traditional authority
Mm-hmm.
does have its own limitations
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the progression of development in local
Yes.
communities, because they can operate based on maybe favoritism, you know.
Yes.
They favor some certain traders. They can operate based on patriarchal structures, that
Yeah.
exclude some certain groups or
Yes.
some certain, such as women, and
Yeah, especially female traders. Yes.
yes. So as town planners, spatial planning and land use management system is there as a system that regulates development
Mm,
within local communities. So now that is when the traditional authorities now are forced to succumb or to abide by those regulatory those frameworks that are put in place by spatial
mhm.
planning and land use management, such as the formulation of the town planning scheme.
Yeah.
Now, in the preparation of those plans and policies, such as the town planning scheme, the traditional authorities are uh, are are made to be involved, or they are made to participate in the process, so that they are aware of what the scheme is, how the
Mm,
scheme regulates development, and how they are expected to abide by the town planning scheme
okay.
as it becomes the regulatory plan for them as well. And they are made aware there's capacity building initiatives that town planning has that are there to educate traditional leaders as well, and
Mm,
to make them feel like they also have a role because
Yes.
traditional leaders mostly operate on cultural practices, and
True.
they're mostly very stubborn people. So you
Mm.
must make them feel like they are
They are heard.
very important
Mm.
stakeholders when you prepare those plans. As I said, that it is a bottom up approach that you should be aware of. You should be aware of the fact that traditional leaders need to feel like their voices are heard. They need to feel like they are part of the planning. You
Mm.
don't just come to them and tell them that, okay,
This is
look,
what
we
needs to
have
be
this
done.
plan in place and
Mm.
this is how things are going to operate. You come to them and say, we are planning to formulate such a thing and we are going to need to work with you. So it is a collaborative approach. It's
Yes.
not yes, it's not an approach where you tell them what to do, but it's an approach where you collaborate with the
You hear
traditional
what they
authority.
want to say and how then you can.
Yes. And you
Yes.
make them feel like they are part of the team. You know, they are
Mm.
not working for you, but they are working with you.
Yeah, I feel like you just even answered my follow-up question in terms of that, and I understand what you are saying. And I feel like the main problem then is the fact that whether or not planners in a particular municipality are then collaborating with traditional leaders to create better spaces for informal traders. That's where then the problem is, whether the collaboration between the two is not only planners telling traditional authorities what needs to be done and what the rules or the policies say, but then hearing what they have to say and then finding a ground where both parties are being heard, and then you plan better for informal traders.
Yes, so you collaborate, and as
Mm.
you're saying, you reach common grounds
Yes.
because you also look traditional leaders. They know the local markets, they know the potential
Mm.
customers, they know the areas with potential. So they, as much as they are not well informed when it comes to urban planning,
Mm.
but they are part of the research that needs to be done. They are part of the answers that you as a planner need because they can be able to navigate throughout everything that happens within their local communities.
From your involvement, I saw on your profile as well that you've been part of the local economic development. Um, what are some of the successful approaches or maybe initiatives that have been implemented to empower or maybe support informal traders within their communities?
Okay.
Mm.
So there is quite it depends depending on the municipality that the community is under.
Mm.
But in most municipalities or in the municipalities that I've been with, you have initiatives that support local community members through fundings. You know, local community members are able to apply for funding in municipalities if they want to establish or to conduct local projects. And also when it comes to informal traders as well, they are able to maybe apply to get stalls. They are supported by the municipality. They are given the stalls where they can work on. Also, the municipalities are also vastly working on making sure that the infrastructure that is required
Mm.
by the people that are doing informal trading,
Mm.
it is provided. So as part of the local economic development plans, you have frameworks that allocate spaces where informal traders can operate, where there's incentives for local traders where they can be able to work, where they can be able to get supported even in terms of
Mm.
funding. There's entrepreneurial entrepreneurship, sorry, and business incubations that
Yeah.
are successful in local communities that support entrepreneurs, you know,
Yeah.
and they favor business environment. So you do have those incubators. You do even in like my currently where I stay, I am at Hammersdale, and Hammersdale is part of eThekwini municipality,
Mm.
and there is a business development districts that is going on around the area. We have some local malls that are being built,
Yeah.
and in those initiatives, that is where you as planners you make
Mm.
space for businesses to operate. You make space for local businesses because the people that are given priorities in such cases become the local community members, where
Yeah.
they have to submit their proposals, and they are the ones that are prioritized first before business is giving to other places. And you also have um, cultural tourism as well, you
Mm.
know, that includes arts, sports, crafts, design, the cultural events that are happening in local communities, where people showcase their talents, where people are allowed to have events and they are supported by the municipalities or the local municipalities to host
Oh,
those events. They are
okay.
given financial incentives so that they can be able to host those events that are part of the community cultures, but
Mm.
also that are contributing to growing the economy of the
Mm.
communities.
Okay. Oh, that's a lot. You shared a
Thank
lot
you.
of successful approaches, and I think that it like opened my eyes as well to understand that it just differs in terms of municipalities and what is occurring in different towns and areas as well. Um,
Yes.
to understand what approaches can be used in that area. Like you said, bottom up approach. It just requires analysis and understanding of what the situation of the town is and what the problems of informal traders in those spaces are, to then understand what is required from you as a planner to then create better spaces for those people. So there's this other planning tool that I would like to share with you, which is the concept of well-being. And personally, I feel like it's a valuable approach for understanding the impacts of planning decisions on individuals and the community. So I would like to know, in your experience, what challenges do you think planners typically face when they're trying to incorporate the well-being of informal traders into urban planning processes?
There's quite a number of challenges that town planners
Yes.
face. As I've mentioned, that we have traditional authorities play a huge role um,
Yes.
in facilitating the growth and also the practices that happen in informal trading or in local communities. So at
Mm.
certain times, you might find that the traditional authorities want to override the voices of the planning policies that are there just so that they can put patriarchal structures, regardless of how sustainable it is. If traditional leaders want to operate according to their patriarchal structures, that is how they are going to operate. If they want to operate based on favoritism of certain traders, you know, that is how they are going to operate. And that hinders the fair competition and economic
Mm.
growth of local communities. So there's quite a number of challenges. You know, there can be cost limitations
Yeah.
because you find that there's quite a lot that need to be done in rural areas. You know, in terms of infrastructure development, there's quite a lot that needs to be done, providing basic services, providing basic infrastructure, like just like proper roads. Before you even start to build other things, you need to first establish proper infrastructure.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that is very cost effective, and yeah, it can also play a role in terms of limiting or slow pacing, you know, development in local communities or in rural communities, because there's quite a lot of things that you need to plan for before you actually start planning for some innovative development, such as your provision of malls and all those other big
Yeah.
things. You need to first establish the foundation in terms of having the right infrastructure.
Just want to say thank you so much for giving me this time and coming to engage with me. All the answers that you have shared and the knowledge that you have shared has been very informative. I've been making notes throughout the discussion. Just to close off, what are your recommendations for policymakers, traditional leaders, or planners who aim to create a more supportive and collaborative environment for informal traders?
I'd say that just as you've mentioned,
Yes.
collaborative approach,
Yes.
collaborative planning, it is very important between town planners, traditional leaders, and informal traders so that you can promote economic growth and preserve cultural significance in informal trading. Very important to have that community participation, have that dialogue between town planners and community leaders, have those capacity building initiatives that support informal traders, and where town planners and traditional leaders can work together and collaborate and have a dialogue and plan together. That is the most,
Yes.
I think, the most effective approach. You know,
Yes.
you plan together. Town planners bring in their knowledge, traditional leaders bring in their knowledge, the community members bring in their knowledge,
Yes.
and then that is where you'll find the most effective approach to tackle the
Mhm.
issues that we have.
You mentioned collaborative approach, community participation, having the dialogue and capacity building initiatives, and the most important thing, planning together, where we all come together and everyone shares their experiences and knowledge so we can create sustainable and collaborative environments for informal traders or the community in general. Thank you once again, Wendy, for coming on to Community Catalyst and sharing your insights and knowledge with me on this important topic.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, and I hope the knowledge that I gave in is able to assist, and it will go a long way. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me once again. I hope you guys found that discussion and conversation informative, and you also got to understand what the role of traditional leaders is in the context of urban planning, some of the challenges that informal traders then face, even the challenges that planners face when they're trying to create sustainable trading spaces for informal traders. Wendy even shared some successful approaches in terms of local economic development, things like funding initiatives, frameworks for allocation of spaces, and incubators as well. I hope you found this episode very, very helpful and you got to learn and understand more about the role of traditional leaders and how planners can better collaborate with traditional leaders and informal traders to better create a supportive and collaborative environment for informal traders. And like Wendy shared, collaborative approach, community participation, having the dialogue, and creating capacity building initiatives is what's going to help us plan together and create these supportive and collaborative environments for informal traders. I am your host, uThubelihle Mlambo, and I am signing out.